all across the city. Yet, big oil wants to build another, the Keystone XL pipeline, putting millions of Americans at risk. Is this risk worth its reward? Also, guns on school campus. The NRA has announced their school safety proposal that includes arming and training school staff. Will these measures make our schools safer, or will they make our teachers and students more at risk? And this past December, Michigan State Legislature passed a law making Michigan a right-to-work state, and now they're back at it, trying to pass a law that will strip unions of their exclusivity rights, which means attacks against the middle class and working class. When is it going to stop?
So tonight we kick things off with our Tuesday Politics panel. Joining us tonight are Patrick Hedger, policy analyst with FreedomWorks, and Neil McCabe, conservative commentator, editor, the Guns and Patriots newsletter. Welcome, gentlemen. Hey, all right, let's get started. As Richard just mentioned, we've got oil-covered ducks being recovered now in Arkansas. 22 homes have been evacuated. This is all thanks to an ExxonMobil pipeline that ruptured, carrying tar sands oil. So we've got thousands of barrels of oil spilled here in Arkansas, and yet conservatives and the oil barons want to build a massive pipeline to carry even more tar sands oil from Canada all the way down to Texas. Shouldn't we be rethinking this stuff now that we're seeing the effects of some of these spills?
First of all, I think we should congratulate Exxon for its response, deploying 15 trucks and 33 storage tanks and really addressing this emergency. I think there have been lessons learned from BP, and we're seeing it in action right now.
How about we just put ourselves in a situation where we don't have to do this stuff anymore, where we don't have to be...
You mean just burn wood?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure.
Let the sun burn, let the wind blow, let the oceans do their thing.
Well, I mean, you look at the billions of dollars we've invested in wind power over the years. Over the past few decades, we've invested billions of taxpayer dollars in wind power, and we're still only producing about 3% of the energy needs of the U.S. consumer. So at the end of the day, what I don't want to revert to is burying my head in the sand at every little risk there is in the world. I mean, if you really look at it, you say thousands of barrels of oil. Yes, it was 12,000 barrels of oil that did spill in Arkansas today. But if you look at that in the bigger picture, the big picture show, let's look at the bigger picture. The big picture is that we burn 18 million barrels of oil in this country a day. So that's 0.6% of the barrels of oil that we burn every day that somehow leaked. And what the great thing about a pipeline is that when the leak was detected, they shut the pipeline off and the oil stopped flowing.
I'll give you that. Richard, I'll let you jump in here in just a second. But this is a relatively small spill compared to what we've seen, especially in the Gulf. But this Keystone pipeline, it's going to be built right on top of the Ogallala Aquifer, right?
Yes.
Did I pronounce that right?
It's actually going to be built mostly downhill from the aquifer, and last I checked, oil doesn't flow uphill.
Okay. Well, this aquifer contains billions of gallons of water. 2 million Americans use this aquifer for agricultural needs. There's 20% of farms that depend on this. Aren't the risks a little too high? I mean, you're saying, okay, oil doesn't flow uphill, but we still have, I mean, we're talking about the center of our country, some of the most pristine natural resources here. We're not talking about just a small town in Arkansas.
But it is a spigot, Sam. I mean, you can turn the spigot off as soon as you detect a leak.
But I think you guys are missing Sam's point here, and I think Sam is right for pointing this out.
Sam's point is that if they detect a leak, they'll just let it keep going.
Is that even
right, because it was so easy when we detected a leak in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, if the government didn't force BP to drill in deep waters and they could drill some more safely in shallow waters, then we wouldn't have had that problem.
I still think we're missing the point here. What's happening in Mayflower, Arkansas is a result of a pipeline rupture. Even if it's only 0.06% of the oil being released, just imagine if 0.06% of that oil gets into the water supply of 20 million Americans.
Wow, it's a tragedy for those people in Arkansas.
And so that's what we should have a Keystone pipeline altogether.
And there will be remedies for that.
The ultimate remedy is not having a pipeline, right?
Once again, let's look at the big picture. What is your alternative? How are we going to power the grid with wind power if it's only producing 3% of our needs? I mean, your alternative is let's shut the cameras and lights off and go outside and camp.
This is the short-sightedness of our energy policy in this country. We've seen our European allies use other types of energy. They've put wind in the ocean. They've used other types of power. They've used sun panels.
They've got solar panels on 250,000 homes in Germany. I mean,
and it works.
Yeah.
But we just don't want to invest it in here because the oil lobby's gone too far.
One of the reasons why we need energy independence in this country is because so much of our energy comes from the Middle East. And so if the Keystone Pipeline, what are you judging that risk against? Is it more important to have the Keystone Pipeline at the risk of putting our troops in the Middle East?
I don't know what you're talking about because the Keystone Pipeline isn't going to give us any oil. They wanted to go to Texas.
Yes. To Texas.
It's going to be refined in the Gulf and sent over to China.
Well, I don't know that.
That's actually none of us know that. It's actually up to the market to decide.
Then here's a pretty simple question. We have part of the Keystone Pipeline already built. It goes to Nebraska, where it's refined.
Okay.
Can't all this oil be refined from Nebraska and sent across the United States? Why do they suddenly want it to go to Texas, where there's more shipping lanes?
I'm just wondering why there's suddenly all this concern over 800 miles of pipeline when we have 55,000 miles of pipeline in this country that are operating safely every day.
Because it's a 19th century energy form, and we're in the 21st century now.
Actually, wind power is much older than oil power. I mean, you look at all those ancient windmills in Holland. I mean, if wind power was so great, they'd still be building those.
That's what they're still
hear about those wind-powered ships?
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, like I said, I think we're missing the broader argument here. You brought up the whole idea of energy independence.
Yes.
And tell me if I'm wrong on this one, but I think energy independence is bigger than just oil. We need to talk about other uses of energy.
We need a balanced approach.
Oil is a renewable resource. It's a non-renewable resource.
Sure.
So when it runs out, it runs out. So
we're going to run out. When are we going to run out? We're going to run out what, 150
I
years?
think if you guys have your way, we would never run out, because
200
you guys would drill an Anwar and kill the caribou and, you know, just crush biodiversity. But you can go on about that point.
I think that in 200 years, we'll be able to figure out an alternative. But as far as I can tell, the reserves that are off the shore of Brazil.
Let me bring another perspective in here real quick. We've got a 78-year-old woman, Eleanor Fairchild, who was arrested on her own property trying to stop this Keystone Pipeline from being built. Do you guys have a problem with a foreign corporation using their highly toxic tar sands that they don't want to refine in Canada? They want to build a pipeline, ship it down here where it can be refined in the United States. Do you have a problem with us being the dumping ground mining pit for Canada?
Are you
and having
concerned about
homes?
Canadian imperialism, Sam?
Are you? That's the question.
I think they're our ally.
I'm really not concerned with letting the free market work. I mean, this Keystone Pipeline met 53 separate standards set out by the State Department and the Department of Transportation. So when the government deems it safe, get it out of the way.
All right, folks, we will. I promise this conversation will definitely continue. But today, the National Rifle Association released a new report on how they were going to protect our nation's schools. And of course, that report did not include, it included a lot of recommendations, including changing how states allow for people, how states train individuals to use guns. Sure. It also talked about increasing collaboration with law enforcement, encouraging schools to take part in safety procedures to make the school more safer. But what it missed out on, or the main part of it, was putting guns in school. And do you feel as though putting guns in school is an answer?
It can be an answer, and I certainly people don't have an obligation to be a victim, and so if people want to be armed, they should have the right to do that.
But interestingly enough, in this whole
including teachers,
absolutely,
they believe that, Sam.
So don't worry. You're saying that teachers can't be trusted with firearms? I think teachers are the bedrock of this society, Sam.
Hey, how dare you? But hold on a second now. So I just want to go a little further in this. So the task force leader, former Congressman Hutchinson, was asked what gun should the staff be allowed to have, and he stated the following: he thinks they should have sidearms, shotguns, and AR-15s. And as we all know, AR-15 was the weapon that was used by Adam Lanza in the Sandy Hook shooting. Do you think AR-15 should be in our schools?
AR-15 is such a wide category. Basically, what you're talking about is a military-style long gun.
I'm glad you brought that up. A military-style gun, which we're not. So we're not at war. We're educating students.
Right.
And we should have those guns in our schools.
Well, I think you have to get over the fact that people enjoy using military-style guns.
I agree with you. But
And
do you think those military-style guns should be allowed in our schools?
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, we're talking about a pistol grip. They're designed to look like an M16 or an M4 because that's having the stuff.
Should be exposed to our children.
Yes, it's all cosmetic. It's not
cosmetic. Weapons of war should be disposed to our children. That's completely nonsensical.
Everything's a rock is a weapon of war.
Patrick, did you go to middle school here in the United States, high school?
I did, yeah.
So I'm a fan of teachers. Neil, I agree with you. I think teachers are the bedrock of our society. They should be paid way more. But in every profession, from teachers to bankers on Wall Street to cops to whatever, you've got some bad apples. You've got some weirdos who are in the position.
Right.
Did you have any teachers that you would have been really uncomfortable with if you knew that they had an AR-15 in their desk?
This isn't an issue I really focus on too much. I'm more of an economist, going to deal with the nuts and bolts of the economy. But looking at it, if we're worried about all the nut jobs in society, then let's disarm the government.
There you go.
Neil, what about you? Would you have a problem? Can you think back and think of some teachers that you would have had a problem having a gun in their desk while you were in class?
I think there were some teachers who were teaching me who would have liked to have had a gun in some of those.
Perhaps. But this is the situation we create, right? If we're going to let all teachers carry guns, that includes all teachers, right? That includes the ones who are unstable, which many
If someone's been adjudicated as incompetent, then obviously some judge has decided that their constitutional rights have been waived or taken away.
Okay, so you don't
willy-nilly.
So then you would support universal background checks on all gun purchases, including the 40% that currently aren't background checks, to make sure those people who've been ruled unstable and our teachers don't get it.
Because you're telling me some gangbanger or terrorist or felon is going to show up for a background check.
No, but I'm saying.
So who are you supposed to be blocking? Who are you supposed to be guarding
against?
And
I'm glad you brought this up, because today Congressman Emmanuel Cummings came out and said he pushed forward a law that would stop straw purchases. Basically, when folks go in,
it's all really illegal.
Well, I mean, it's already illegal. He would make it a felony, and he would put.
It's already a felony.
He would have stricter penalties for going in and making a straw purchase for somebody who has a gun.
Right.
Right. So you agree that we should increase the penalties on felons for increase the penalties for people who do straw purchases?
I don't have a problem with somebody who willfully performs a straw purchase act. Like, for instance, the Fast and Furious thing. I think all of those people involved with Fast and Furious should have been in jail.
You mean the Fast and Furious where
the straw man operation run by the Obama Justice Department.
That was started by the Bush administration, for the record.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
Stop.
In the laws in Arizona,
it was started by the Bush administration.
Stop.
And the laws in Arizona that pretty much forbid any of the ATF agents from confiscating any weapons that, even though they know they're going across the border to be given to Mexican drug lords or whatever, you need to actually see that happen before you can move in to do anything about it.
I had an attorney from one of those gun stores tell me directly that the clerks of that store were told by ATF to go ahead with purchases that they wanted to deny.
So what was the motive? 20 seconds. Tell me this conspiracy theory real quick of what was going on here.
Well, it is to say that unregulated guns were responsible for destabilizing Mexico.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
We'll get back to conspiracy theory tonight with Neil McCabe on Politics Panel after the break.
Let me ask you a question.
No, let me ask you a question.
Here, on this network, is where we're having the debate. We have our knives out.
The issue is the surveillance state.
How do you justify staying there as a guest?
We are in a situation where the entire...
I didn't agree to talk about the surveillance state.
You know how sometimes you see a story and it seems so whole and complete, you think you understand it, and then you glimpse something else. You hear or see some other part of it and realize everything you thought you knew, you don't know? I'm Thom Hartmann. Welcome to The Big Picture.
Here's Mitt Romney trying to figure out the name of that thing that we Americans call a donor. I'm sorry. I'm just a guy who cares an awful lot about my country.
You, sir, are a fool. You know what? That is mine.
Are there terrorist cells in your
Far left
neighborhood?
does not want the USA to defeat terrorism.
You cannot be a liberal and a Christian.
Republicans lie.
It's really so stupid.
You know, the corporate media distracts us from what you and I should care about because they're a profit-driven industry that sells us sensationalistic garbage and calls it breaking news. I'm Abby Martin, and we're going to break the set.
Looking for celebrity gossip and the feel-good fluff? You won't find it here. If you're looking for relevant stories, unique perspectives, and tough questions, tune into RT.
And we are back with a political panel. Joining us is Patrick Hodges and Neil McCabe. I know I mispronounced your name.
Hey,
sorry.
no worries.
And we're glad that you guys are here. Listen, the New York City Council has finally achieved a deal on guaranteeing sick leave for all of New York City. The measure will give 5 days of sick leave to full-time employees in the city and allow for part-time employees to accrue 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours worked. Mayor Bloomberg has said he will veto the bill, saying that it's short-sighted. It's short-sighted economic policy that will take our city in the wrong direction. With that being said, Bloomberg LP, Mr. Bloomberg's financial firm, offers these benefits to their employees. The City Council has enough votes to veto the plan and override Mayor Bloomberg's veto should the employees be guaranteed sick leave. What is your take on that? Do you think full-time employees should get sick leave?
Well, I just think it's so nice to see Bloomberg stepping back from the nanny state. It's really great. But, you know, we solved the problem right there. You just said it. Bloomberg's company already offers this sick leave. So why do we need the government? Why do we need the government mandate?
To his employees, but the whole point of this is he offers it to his employees, but almost hundreds and thousands of New Yorkers do not get paid sick leave, and that's why this law is being passed to begin with.
Well, you look at it, good or bad policy, it just kind of sets this dangerous precedent slippery slope. I mean, if we're going to tell businesses, I think this law applies to businesses that are 15, 20 employees in that ballpark.
It eventually will apply to all businesses.
Micromanaging the economy again. And, well, yeah, it
so
applies to all the businesses.
Are you saying that hardworking Americans shouldn't be guaranteed sick leave if they're sick?
I'm saying it's not the government's job to regulate these things. This is a private contract.
Why is it not
when
the
you're
government's
employed,
job
you enter into a private contract with your employer. If you don't like the benefits they offer, go get a job somewhere else.
I hear that.
I wish I could tell more people that, but the government keeps getting in the way of job creation like this.
What's the biggest driver of our debt here? Isn't it healthcare spending?
I thought it was solar energy pork.
You know, I would say, considering how high healthcare costs are, we probably want to do something to reduce those costs, right? So why do we want workers, especially restaurant workers, forced to go to work sick because they don't have any sick days and spreading the flu around other people?
So you're saying giving New York City employees more paid time off,
employees in America,
right, will cure the deficit and will make healthcare costs fall because they'll spend the night spend the day at home watching TV.
Won't be at work once again infecting their coworkers and their customers.
It's really short-sighted because you're not differentiating compensation with wages. You say you're going to keep the wages stagnant, but you have to realize that paid sick day, it comes from somewhere. So on the net of the economy, it's going to reduce overall wages, and that's going to reduce employment.
It comes from that 1% who've seen 275% income gains over the last 30 years.
Because this bill we're talking about here talks about 15 to 25 employee businesses. That's not the 1%. That's millions of Americans that are trying to operate in the free economy.
Restaurants, beauty parlors.
Let's correct this. What the bill says is if you have 20 or more employees, you have to implement the sick days earlier than if you have 15 or lesser employees. So everybody in New York, whether you have 1,000 employees or 1 employee, will have to give mandatory sick days. With that being said, all the facts show that when people are given more sick days, they end up getting sick less because they employ more preventative healthcare measures. And on top of that, the facts also show that when you have accrued sick days, you actually go to work when you're sick more often.
So if it's so smart, how come people don't do it on their own? If it's so smart,
that's why
if
Bloomberg
it's like
does it
so
on its own.
obvious that it helps the company
at the same time,
to give people more time off.
You just touched on something really important. It's that the government, which most governments can't even figure out how to balance a budget, are somehow smarter than all these business owners in the country that are balancing budgets year to year. And somehow no better than business owners. I own a Subway. You know what? I own a Subway and I want sick workers coming in. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's irresponsible, and the market will flood those irresponsible business owners out of the market.
We are the only developed country in the world that doesn't offer paid sick time and vacation time, guaranteed paid sick time and vacation time.
You look at the slippery slope.
You want to be as productive as France?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point I was about to get to. You said
look at all the equality of life indicators, they rank higher than us on all of them.
Except for they hit 12% unemployment in the Eurozone today. That's a lot worse than the U.S.
Well, that's a whole other issue, okay?
No, it's not a whole other issue. It's not getting any good product. It's not a good place to do business. They've got 12% unemployment because they've got a government that they think knows best. And so you can't do business in Europe, and you've got rampant unemployment.
I've got Germany with 4% unemployment. That
they're bucking the trend. I mean, but they're propping up the rest of all these failing countries with all these huge nanny states.
Well, we probably shouldn't.
The German companies are opening their factories here.
Yeah, let's talk about all the Mercedes that are built in Alabama, because they have right to work.
Well, you know why they're building them all here? Because you're right. It's becoming more competitive because they don't have to pay them stuff. We're becoming the low-wage labor nation of Europe.
Those people in the South that are building Mercedes and Audis.
Before we go on to the next topic, I think that the truth of the matter here is, and I think the crux of it all is that if you work 40 hours a week and you're a hardworking American, I believe that every hardworking American should be allowed to take a sick day if they're sick with the flu and not think they're ever going to get fired or laid off, which is what happens when there's not accrued sick leave.
And I think a hardworking American should have the right to be able to explore in a healthy economy for other jobs if their employer doesn't offer that.
And you're only going to hurt the small businessmen. The big companies, they can afford it. It's the small businesses that are going to get crushed by you and your meddling.
But let's go ahead and micromanage. Let's let people that can't even balance a budget micromanage businesses that can.
And how many of those small businesses in New York are run by immigrants?
On our way to being the low-wage labor nation for the rest of the world, right? Okay. Let's move on. All right. Let's move on to this sequester that you guys said wasn't going to do anything. So far, we're starting to see the effects. Huffington Post had the 99 problems sequester caused all of them. We've got Air Force base jobs lost in Tennessee, medical response teams linked in central Nebraska. I can go down the list. They're all over the country, and they're just starting to take an effect. So it's a pretty simple question. Does government spending create jobs, or doesn't it? Because here we have government spending being cut, and we have jobs being lost. So
government spending creates dependency, and that's what you're seeing here. And at the end of the day, stop calling them cuts, because next year the government's going to spend $50 billion more than it spent in 2011. At the end of the day, the Budget Control Act, which put this sequester in place, gave all the power in the world for Geithner, or now Jack Lew, and President Obama to sit down and figure out, hey, where are we going to make government more efficient? Instead, they went with an across-the-board cut made to hurt people in order to buy political expedience.
Well, that only happened because Republicans wouldn't close loopholes on jet
It only happened because Republicans and Democrats in Congress prior to 2008 didn't operate a balanced budget.
Listen, you say that all government spending does is create dependence. So you have a problem with being dependent on police officers, firefighters, and teachers. That's a problem.
I have a problem with people getting perverse incentives in the economy where their savings are absolutely cut the oil subsidies, cut the wind subsidies. There's much larger.
To go deeper and deeper, to drill deeper and deeper.
No, that's a government regulation that's forcing them to go deeper. But if you look at what's happening in the economy, it's that private savings is being crowded out by all these FICA taxes, which we're driving up. So people are becoming more dependent on government spending. If we let the free market work, when the government cut itself a little bit because it's not running a balanced budget, we wouldn't need it.
Let's talk this whole idea of, I love when you guys talk about this whole idea of, oh, we just need the free market and that's going to solve all of our problems. So how do you suggest,
you loved it more.
I mean, how do you suggest and I think Sam is right, how do you suggest we deal for common good, like the park service, the highways, the schools, the hospitals, which are the background, which is the backbone of government spending.
Let's bring it back to the sequester, and you got to look at what happened.
That is part of the sequester.
Well, you look at what happened.
49 airports have been shut down because of the sequester.
Oh, a lot of those airports barely see any traffic. I was just quoting an article for that.
Why aren't they relying on their airport trust fund?
Let's bring it back to the sequester. How can the sequester be so damaging? How can we see this catastrophic economic apocalypse when we're spending more money than we did last year, and next year we'll spend more money than we did this year?
We've got more people living in the country.
Oh, the sequester impacts are rapidly outpacing inflation and population.
I can tell you exactly where we're seeing the sequester cuts. You look at states like Tennessee.
Exactly where Barack Obama and the Treasury Secretary wanted them to go. That's how the law is written.
It wasn't Barack Obama or Tim Geithner. It was Paul Ryan, because if the Paul Ryan budget would take effect.
Paul Ryan has no control.
Hold on, let me finish.
He's not the executive.
If I could finish. If the Paul Ryan budget were able to take effect, he would cut Head Start regardless. So with the sequester cuts going into, there's a lot of poor families who are basically saying you cannot bring your child back to daycare, and your child doesn't have the ability to learn and get an education.
I mean, that's Barack Obama's fault.
So you're saying it's okay for us to cut education funding for children?
I didn't say that. I said Head Start is. I don't like the Head Start program, and it's been shown that any positive effect.
That's not true. All the research shows that if you get the kids early enough.
By third grade, everything evens out. By third grade, it all evens out.
Head Start is before third grade.
There's also evidence that boys should be in school later, and there's also evidence that shows that boys should not.
Matter getting to the weeds.
Boys entering school should be delayed.
You got to look at the raw numbers. These aren't cuts. Stop calling them cuts.
That's exactly what they are. When kids don't go to school, that is a cut.
It's a reduction in future spending. And Obama, as the
I'll tell you exactly where I would cut. I would cut the corporate loophole. I would cut the tax subsidies for millionaires and billionaires.
Name a program.
Private jets.
There are no extra people in the whole government.
Let's get out of the weeds here. You're saying this is just a reduction in future spending.
Yes.
Let me ask you a question. We're seeing reductions in future spending all across Europe. Can you name one time in the history of modern civilization when we've cut our way into better economies and into quote-unquote cut our way into prosperity?
Look, it's not about it's not getting into the weeds here. I'm saying the burden of government has grown, and we're seeing that.
Stand by. Hold on.
When has austerity ever led to economic growth?
That was the question. That to support this increased spending, we have to borrow money.
Exactly.
And so what you're asking is, I can sprinkle Chinese borrowed money all over the economy to create jobs.
I would add to that question. When has deficit spending ever led to economic depression or downturn?
We're looking at Cyprus right now. Their economy's contracted. I think it's 30%.
Their own money.
When you pull that money out of the economy,
so you want to rob workers so they're harder.
Don't you think it's going to hurt inflation?
You guys have not answered either the question that we posed. When has deficit spending caused a recession, or when has cutting our way to
it's reduction in future spending?
All right, fine. When has austerity measures to
not
go to
austerity.
economic
There's no
growth.
cuts.
What
How is it
austerity?
austerity?
The budget's higher than it ever was.
So what's going on? What are all these layoffs? Are these just all mystery?
It's all-
Where are all these layoffs?
It's this wonderful thing. It's this wonderful thing called the Washington Monument Syndrome.
They're just doing it. They're doing it for the publicity.
It's the Washington Monument Syndrome. Nobody's going to notice when you lay off the White House calligrapher, but if you close the Washington Monument, everyone's going to be up in arms. All you're doing is buying political.
This is
well,
such
it's
an old
closed because of an
trick.
earthquake, but that's
we gotta
political
close the
science term for it.
Sam, I love this. I love this, Sam. Though the whole ideal when they say, "Oh, these are imaginary cuts." I wonder how those people feel when they lost their job.
not
It was
like
imaginary
reduction in
for them.
future
Or when they lost their job and they weren't employed because of sequester. It was, I wonder how that.
I'm just wondering. I'm wondering
when
when
cut some of these jobs. It's
I'm
all a
wondering-
furlough.
Look, these reductions in future spending, whatever you want to call them, Patrick, have had healthcare workers laid off in Saranac Lake, New York, education jobs lost in Sioux City, research employees lost in Durham, North Carolina.
$250 million
So
in
whatever
foreign
you
aid
want
for
to call
Egypt.
them, if you want to
Sam,
call them
I'm-
cuts or reductions in future spending, we're seeing job layoffs. We're seeing people have
And if you
working
read
people
the
have less
law
money in their
that
pocket
President Obama
to
signed
spend.
into law, and as the executive of this country is enforcing, he has the power to decide where these cuts come from. And he didn't cut foreign aid. He didn't cut foreign security.
Okay.
He cut the things that will be buying political experience.
Last time I checked, and maybe things have changed since my civics class, but spending and this sort of stuff originates in Congress, not
It is
And the law that originated in Congress that he signed, you should read it. It's a really great piece of legislation.
Here comes Bob Woodward.
It is indeed the power of the Congress. More on tonight. More on tonight from the political panel after this break.
You know how sometimes you see a story and it seems so whole and complete, you think you understand it, and then you glimpse something else. You hear or see some other part of it and realize everything you thought you knew, you don't know? I'm Thom Hartmann. Welcome to The Big Picture.
Well, a potentially deadly blizzard taking aim for the Northeast. It's expected to hit starting in a few hours. From New York to Maine, we have team coverage of the storm.
But what we're watching is the very heavy snow moving into Boston proper.
Earlier today, it was very sticky. You can see it's starting to become much more powdery now.
So the bottom line, there is still a lot of snow out here. A good place for a snowball fight.
Jason, it has been a pretty incredible day there and record snowfall throughout. What's it been like?
Nobody's allowed to be driving unless it's an emergency vehicle.
There are a few
right
exceptions.
I'm the worst journalist in the world.
The White House soup of the day. My favorite radio guy in Fort Lauderdale is minestrone chicken sausage.
I want you to watch what we're about to do because you've never seen anything like this on television.
And welcome back to the politics panel. Joining us tonight are Patrick Hedger, Neil McCabe. Thank you, guys.
Hey,
Let's
thank you.
get back to it.
Nice
I want to read something that Gary Bauer, you guys' ally, a hardline.
I haven't seen him at the Evil Legion of Doom meetings.
You haven't?
Yeah.
That means he wasn't
He's a good right-thinking American.
Well, I know why you haven't seen him, because he uttered this quote the other day, and I think he did it on accident, but here we go. He said, quote, "If we gave our voters an accurate portrayal of our ideas, that we want to cut the rate of growth on Social Security, give tax cuts to billionaires, and then the values issues would be more popular than the economic agenda of the current Republican Party." Now, I think what he's trying to do here was trying to get Republicans to hold the line on same-sex marriage by saying, hey, considering what we're talking about with cutting Social Security and giving tax breaks to billionaires, this is probably the more appealing message. But in doing so, he pretty much said what I've been saying for a while, what Richard's been saying for a while, what a lot of people on the left have been saying for a while, and that is that Republican Party is the party of billionaires. Is he wrong?
That's weird, considering all the billionaires that support the Democratic Party.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's weird. It's just weird that so many Democrats are funded by the billionaires in Silicon Valley.
It's really hard to defend every last comment from everybody that calls themselves a Republican saying whatever. But at the end of the day, it's not the party of billionaires. We're all paying for Social Security. We're all paying for the social safety net through FICA taxes. And what's going on here is these programs aren't stable. It's not that we want to cut them to give the money to billionaires. We want to restructure the formula so that the trillions of dollars that we've promised to hardworking Americans doesn't dry up all of a sudden in the wake of the next economic crisis.
Isn't it though that if you, for example, whichever one you want to take, Medicare, we've got Medicare prescription Part D, which is a huge giveaway to the pharmaceutical industry. Why don't we get rid of that rather than raising the retirement age?
Because there was a deal cut where the Obama administration promised to leave the farmer alone in exchange for their support of Obamacare.
Talk about where Part D came from.
I agree with you.
And so that's why, Richard, that's why the Democrats used to...
You feel as though we should get the corporations off Capitol Hill?
No.
So you think lobby should stay on Capitol Hill? He doesn't.
I think that citizens have a right to petition their
So
government.
big oil lobbyists and corporations on Capitol Hill is okay with you?
I'm just saying if we had a fair, flat, and simple tax code, if we had a fair tax code, there'd be no incentive for corporations to be spending all this money on getting these loopholes in the tax code.
If you want to get rid of lobbyists on Capitol Hill, you should take away the power from Capitol Hill. The only reason there's lobbyists there is because so much of our economy and so much of our money is spent and controlled there. If you decentralize power, return power to the states and the people, there would be no reason to go to Capitol Hill.
Let's get back to the topic of that.
Yeah. So, but also kind of buried within what Gary Bauer's saying is this whole austerity thing here, in which we want austerity, raise the Medicare age, raise the Social Security age, lay off government workers, cut pensions.
How can there be austerity?
But at the same time,
we're spending trillions more than we did 4 years ago.
Let me finish. At the same time that we're calling for all these things, or reductions in future spending, whatever you want to call them, we're also at least one party is advocating for major tax cuts for billionaires. So in this austerity era, what do billionaires have to sacrifice? Name one thing other than maybe longer wait times at private jet airports.
It's what they have to contribite. It's the real estate they can buy, the homes they can build, the boats
then why are they sitting on trillions of dollars worth of cash?
They're not sitting on trillions. They're trillionaires if they're sitting on trillions of dollars.
There is a capital strike. Because basically there's capital on the sidelines that won't get involved.
Why not?
Because they're concerned about the regulatory regime that the Obama administration has inflicted on private industry, because they're concerned about the cost of Obamacare, which is, many of these costs are still a mystery, and as soon as you start this business activity, they're afraid that the confiscatory policies of the Obama administration will tax them out into oblivion. The people don't want to participate because they're afraid.
I hear that, Neil, but I think the S&P 500, when they downgraded our credit rating, they gave an explanation, I guess the capital explanation, and their explanation was there's too much divisiveness in the United States Congress for us to believe in the full faith and credit of the United States government.
We should probably elect a uniter as president, Richard.
But it doesn't escape with the fact the S&P 500 blamed the downgrade of the bonds
Let's get back to the central issue of Social Security here. This isn't a cut for billionaires. There's nothing ridiculous about raising the retirement age. Social Security retirement age was set when people were living to 63 years old. The average life expectancy was 63 years old. So most people weren't even collecting Social Security. We should be proud of our great medical care system that has gotten people living into their 80s, and they're collecting Social Security benefits for a lot longer than the formula that is put in place has accounted for. We have far fewer workers now that are paying into the pay-go benefits that retired people are dependent on.
Speaking about workers, back in December, the Michigan Republican State Legislature in the lame duck session passed a measure that would make the 5th largest state in the union a right-to-work state. This politically motivated attack on the Michigan worker happened at a time when the state was benefiting from the resurgency in the U.S. auto industry. These right-to-work measures started on Tuesday, making union dues optional and opening up the door for freeloaders to benefit from collective bargaining efforts without paying their union dues. And now the GOP is back at it. Michigan State Senator Mike Sharkey has proposed another bill that would ban the exclusivity clause for union representation contracts, allowing for multiple unions to represent the same class of worker in the same workplace, opening up the door for a race to the bottom on union wages and benefits. Isn't this just another ploy of the GOP to dilute the power of collective bargaining and ultimately crush the power of the working class in the state of Michigan and the rest of America?
No. First of all, why are you calling workers freeloaders?
No, I'm calling the workers that are not. I'm calling the law. The law creates.
How dare you?
No, the law.
How dare you? No, these guys are working hard for their money because they don't allow some dues scam by your union thug buddies.
Hold on a second, Neil. Nobody is calling the workers a freeloader. What we're saying is, when the law was created, it was created to create free riders are freeloaders in this particular situation because people they're forced not to join the union, but they get all the benefits of the union.
Why don't you back off on people who are working for a living?
Well, I'm just
they would still be working if there was a union.
They're just getting more money.
Let's look at some of the core causes of what happened.
Keeping the dues
with the auto industry in Michigan. You look what happened in the auto industry in Michigan. The wages weren't competitive. So it wasn't the corporation that was, harming the workers. The workers harming themselves. They're twisting the arms. They're twisting the arms of the state government. They're twisting the arms of the corporation. And look, the fact of the matter is that they can't compete with the manufacturing rates. They can't compete.
They can't compete with China.
Exactly. Tennessee. They can't compete with Alabama, which are right-to-work states. And look, I would much rather have an existent job at $10 an hour than a non-existent job at $35.
$10 an hour to maintain a family of 4, Patrick.
What happens when that $35 an hour evaporates because the company can't afford it?
That $35 an hour job will not evaporate if the United States federal government did a better job of protecting the power of the union.
I think that the unions have done enough damage to the economy of Michigan.
That is not true. The unions have created the middle class in this country.
Okay, yeah, gave us the
and created the auto industry.
The U.S. government
created the auto industry.
And beyond doing both those things, they're the ones maintaining the middle class. They're the ones that have steadily raised wages in this country.
Why have all those union jobs gone overseas?
Look, they went overseas because for some reason we started drinking this Kool-Aid in the 90s that free trade is this great idea. We're going to drop all our protections for domestic industries, including the auto industries.
I'm stunned.
So companies ran overseas for the cheap labor source.
I'm stunned at the suggestion. Hold on.
You just want to rob the value of an American's bank account through protectionism and inflation. That's fine. You're going to hurt the worker a lot worse than right to work will.
I want to do what the United States did from its inception all the way up until the 1980s, when we did have the best middle class, or really the only strong middle class the world had ever seen.
Why wouldn't someone on their own join a union if it's such a great deal? I don't get it. If it's such a great deal, why wouldn't people join
if you
it?
look at Washington State, which is a very progressive liberal state,
A union is a great deal
participation
for
in
people who
dues
don't have to pay dues.
80%.
But really, if you're in a union, it's known you get better wages, you get better benefits. You do have to pay a little bit for that, but in the end, your work at it's on top.
If this is so well known, then why in Washington State, which has one of the higher union participation rates in the country, when given the option to participate in the union's political donations, did people pull out at an 80% rate overnight? If the union was so beneficial, they've been living with it for years, and I'm not going to argue that Washington State is a red state by any means. They're finding red politicians.
I don't think people deciding whether they want to engage in politics really is relevant to this debate.
Politics of the union benefit them overall? That's the argument you're making.
But to go back to the crux of the story here, if unions are such a bad idea, why did these Republicans wait until the lame duck to do this? Every time the Republicans try to crush unions, it happens in the darkness of night when nobody's watching.
Hold on, Richard. Lame duck is still a legitimate session.
Oh boy, here we go. Well, they passed 180 anti-union bills in this lame duck.
A lot of things get passed in lame duck that you support. Okay, so don't be knocking lame duck.
Now, look, what's happening here is the Michigan legislators are trying to bring jobs back to the state. It's been totally
by the Koch brothers and the Tea Party.
Patrick, you get the last word. 10 seconds.
Well, you look at it. You're not going to make as much money in a tax code. You're not going to make as much money with a non-existent $35 an hour job than a $10 an hour job that does exist.
Okay, Patrick Hedger, Neil McKay. Thank you guys so much.
Appreciate it. You guys great.
In other news, slowly but surely, our nation is turning a new leaf when it comes to green energy. Last year, renewable energy production in the United States grew nearly 24%, surpassing nuclear energy production in our nation. And while green energy makes up 11% of our total energy production, the trend shows renewable sources are quickly becoming more common. When energy production grew the fastest was with an 89% increase. Although our nation's addiction to toxic fuels is far from over, clean and green advocates should be encouraged by this trend. For the first time ever, our nation is getting more and more of its energy from wind, solar, hydro, and geothermal energy than it did from the dangerous nuclear power plants. However, we still have a long way to go in the fight against nuclear power and fossil fuels. Call your member of Congress and urge them to support the energy of the future.
So you've all heard of Bad Santa, one of Billy Bob Thornton's finest performances?
It's not real.
Well, it was real. I got sick and all the hair fell out.
How'd you get sick?
I loved a woman that wasn't clean.
Mrs. Santa?
No, it was her sister.
Oh, no.
Well, Billy Bob's got some competition with a rowdy rabbit in San Diego. Patrolman Adam Griffith was enjoying a leisurely Easter Sunday shift when he noticed something strange zipping by him. It was a man dressed up in an Easter bunny suit, driving a classic sidecar motorcycle. Officer Griffiths noticed that the bunny wasn't wearing a helmet, so he pulled him over.
This video shows the moment the Easter Bunny was pulled over, captured by a helmet cam worn by a fellow biker. Even got him waving at the CHP officer as he walked over to tell him why he was being stopped.
The reason for the stop was he was riding a motorcycle. He had no helmet.
And because of his big head, the CHP called a visual impairment.
What he was doing is compromising his safety and everybody else on the roadway by his vision obscuring.
Maybe he was on his way to a furry convention. In the end, however, everything worked out for the holiday hare. He got off without a ticket. A true Easter miracle. After the break, if you listen real carefully, you can hear the sound of money being sucked right out of your wallet by America's wealthy elite. In tonight's Daily Take, Thom will explain how we can bring an end to the reign of the oligarchs and share America's vast sums of wealth.
Let me ask you a question.
No, let me ask you a question.
Here, on this network, is where we're having the debate. We have our knives out.
The issue is the surveillance
How do you justify
state.
staying there as a guest?
We are in a situation where the entire...
I didn't agree to talk about the surveillance state.
You know how sometimes you see a story and it seems so whole and complete, you think you understand it, and then you glimpse something else. You hear or see some other part of it and realize everything you thought you knew, you don't know? I'm Thom Hartmann. Welcome to The Big Picture.
Hours of talking about the same story doesn't make it news. No softball interviews, no puff pieces, only tough questions right here.
I'm the worst journalist in the world.
White House Soup of the Day. My favorite radio guy in Fort Lauderdale is minestrone chicken sausage.
I want you to watch what we're about to do because you've never seen anything like this on television.
It's the good, the bad, and the very, very pudiously ugly. The good. Judge Sarah Evans Barker. On Friday, Judge Barker, the head of the U.S. District Courts of Southern Indiana, declared unconstitutional law that allowed police officers to search suspected immigrants without a warrant. The law also allowed police officers to take custody of any immigrant possessing a certain kind of immigration paper. According to Think Progress, this stipulation created a bizarre loophole in which police officers could arrest an individual holding papers necessary to obtain legal immigration status. Not surprisingly given the evidence, Judge Barker struck the law down, citing a gross violation of the Fourth Amendment, prohibiting unreasonable search and seizure. Good job, Judge Barker. The bad. Tennessee State Legislature. Late last week, the state lawmakers voiced their approval for a bill that, if passed, would tie welfare benefits to student academic performance. The proposal, sponsored by 2 Republicans, would cut welfare checks by 30% for those families whose children don't perform up to state standards. The bill, proposed in January and moved through the committee over the weekend, will face the full Senate vote this week. The Tennessee law already mandates 20% cut of benefits for families of students with poor attendance records, and the welfare program only provides a meager $185 a month to participants. Nevertheless, the state's Health and Human Services Department has withdrawn its opposition to the bill, and lawmakers hope that this bill can serve as some sort of carrot or stick approach to needy families. Right, because a struggling mother needs to add to the stress of having to worry about whether or not her 3rd grader's geography grade is good enough for her to buy groceries this week. And the very, very oh so ugly, the New York Police Department. According to new testimony in the ongoing trial of the NYPD Stop and Frisk program, Police Chief Raymond Kelly designed the program to terrify the city's minority residents. The testimony provided by State Senator Eric Adams stated that back in 2010, Commissioner Kelly told New York officials that he wanted the Stop and Frisk law to instill the fear in them, and the them he was referring to is the blacks and Latino population in the city, that any time they leave their homes, they would be targeted by the police. For years, Kelly and other law enforcement officials defended the stop and frisk as an unpleasant yet necessary public safety measure. Civil liberties groups, on the other hand, have condemned the policy as being discriminatory and intrusive. But if Senator Eric Adams' testimony is true, we now know that the real reason for stop and frisk is even worse than just a bad policy. It's trying to terrify an entire population into submission. And that, America, is just oh so very ugly.
So we're just a few days into April, but last month, in the month of March, we witnessed some really remarkable economic events happen around the planet. First, there was the sequester. You guys remember that at the beginning of the month. This was a self-inflicted wound to our economy that we're just now, today and over the next few days and over the next few weeks and months, we'll start seeing the consequences of as thousands lose their jobs and critical services and communities across the country are reduced or disappear altogether. Children get kicked off Head Start, response times from ambulances, go way up. This is what we're looking at. So why? Why the sequester? Well, because Congress, or I guess I should say Republicans in Congress, couldn't muster up enough fortitude to tell the billionaire class, aka their donor class, that, well, it's time to close those tax loopholes, for corporate jet owners. Time to cut off those tax subsidies for oil corporations like ExxonMobil, the most profitable corporation in the history of the world. And all those other loopholes that let people like Mitt Romney and Paris Hilton pay lower taxes than folks like you and me. So instead, working people are getting hit all around the country. And now, President Obama and some willing Democrats in Congress are joining Republicans in embracing cat food commissioners Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles, and actually floating the idea of cutting Social Security and Medicare, 2 programs created by Democrats. 2 programs that, if don't exist, Democrats really can't say they did much. So it's another raw deal for working Americans. So again, why? Well, because apparently asking the billionaire class to contribute to reducing our deficit, which is actually shrinking faster than at any time in recent history, is just, well, it's too much to ask. And since the billionaires have lobbyists and working people don't, then the billionaires make out like bandits, literally. They make out like bandits, while the rest of us get pink slips. The rest of us get medical bankruptcies and delayed retirements. But this isn't just happening in the United States. It's happening in Europe, too. As austerity deepens in places like Greece and Spain, and their economies sink further into debt and stagnation, and their people sink into desperation and suicide rates spike, the austerity mongers push it even further in the tiny nation of Cyprus. No, it's not enough to lay off government employees and cut pensions to pay off foreign investors who made bad bets in the Eurozone. No, now the austerity mongers want to take money out of people's savings accounts, literally steal money out of the banks that Cypriots thought were safe to hold their money in, and then turn around and bail out those same banks to pay off bad debts. What happened in Cyprus signals a new brand of austerity, or what should better be called outright theft. No longer is the billionaire class garnishing their workers' wages, cutting back on benefits, or reducing pensions. They're just sucking money right out of people's bank accounts. And the rest of Europe, and all of us in the United States, should be paying very close attention. And that is the subject of tonight's Daily Take.
The oligarchs are sucking dry America's middle and working class, while the rest of us are being left to feed off the crumbs. Paul Buchheit, a professor of economic inequality at DePaul University, has written a brilliant piece on Alternate, detailing just how large and outrageous the wealth gap between the oligarchs and the rest of America has become. Let's start off by looking at the Koch brothers. Each of the Koch brothers saw his investments grow, according to Paul, by a staggering $6 billion last year, which, if you do the math, means that they each made about $3 million per hour last year, based on a 40-hour work week. Meanwhile, as Buchheit points out, the average restaurant server made just $2.13 an hour last year, less than 1/millionth of what the Koch brothers pulled in. And while these numbers alone seem incredibly startling, they only begin to paint the picture of wealth inequality in America. On any given day during the winter of 2012, there were around 633,000 homeless Americans on the streets trying to survive another day. According to Buchheit, based on an annual single-room occupancy cost of $558 a month, any one of America's 10 richest citizens would have enough money from his 2012 income to pay for a room for every homeless person in the U.S. for the entire year. One rich person, not even sacrificing a penny of their more than $1 billion wealth, just setting aside 1 year's income, could end all homelessness in America. And if that's not mind-boggling enough, the total combined wealth of these 10 wealthiest Americans is more than the entire U.S. federal housing budget. Even if all 10 were to give up a year's income, their wealth is mind-boggling. According to a survey by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, nearly 20% of the homeless population in America is Hispanic, and the number is growing every day. In fact, for every single dollar of assets that a single black or Hispanic woman has, a member of the Forbes 400 has over $40 million. To put that wealth number in perspective, as Buchheit notes in his piece, for every 1 can of soup owned by a single black or Hispanic woman, one of our wealthiest Americans owns a $30 million mansion and a $10 million yacht. As of 2009, the poorest 47% of Americans owned an unbelievable 0% of America's wealth because their debts exceeded their assets. Contrast that with the era before Reaganomics, when the poorest 47% of Americans at least owned 2.5% of America's wealth, an average of $15,000 per person. The nation's wealth is now instead in the hands of the wealthiest Americans, the oligarchs. Right now, the 400 wealthiest Americans own as much wealth as 62% of our nation, which is the driving force behind America having the 4th highest level of wealth inequality in the world. But why is it that America's oligarchs have managed to obtain so much wealth while the rest of us have nearly nothing, and that one of America's wealthiest businessmen can afford to buy a yacht and a mansion when a Hispanic woman just trying to survive is barely able to pay for a can of soup? It's thanks in part to the high levels of financial secrecy in the United States. The Tax Justice Network's Financial Secrecy Index highlights places around the world that provide the safest havens for tax refugees, otherwise known as millionaires and billionaires who want to escape having to pay their fair share to help their economies so that they can accumulate massive piles of money. And not surprisingly, the United States ranks 5th in the 2011 Financial Secrecy Index, behind the traditional tax havens of Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Hong Kong. In other words, as millions of Americans struggle to survive each and every day, the wealthiest Americans, the oligarchs, are accumulating vast sums of wealth without anyone saying a word or raising a finger. Just look at Mitt Romney. During the campaign in 2012, there was a huge battle over his disclosure, or lack thereof, of just how rich he is. And in the end, while Romney did disclose some information about his assets, including the fact that he was able to hide huge chunks of money in tax havens across the globe, bottom line is that the outrageous levels of wealth inequality in America have been driven, in large part, by our society's coddling of, and the media's willful ignorance towards, our nation's oligarchs. For too long, the wealthiest Americans, like the Koch brothers, have been able to slip under the radar while robbing us blind. The Reaganomics era has seen the largest transfer of wealth from working people to the very, very rich in the history of the world. Trillions of dollars, tens of trillions of dollars. As Elizabeth Warren pointed out a few weeks ago, if workers' wages had kept up with productivity in the years since Reagan, like they did during the generations before Reagan, the minimum wage today would be over $22 an hour. It's time to start calling our oligarchs what they are, oligarchs, and increasingly tax cheats, and people who have corrupted both our politicians, our media, and our market-based economic system. When enough Americans have figured out how badly they've been gamed and ripped off, things will start to change. Spread the word, and check out nobillionaires.com.
And that's the way it is tonight, Tuesday, April 2nd, 2013.
And for more information on any of the stories we covered, visit our websites at thomhartmann.com, freespeech.org, and RT.com. And if you missed any of tonight's show, you can now watch it in Hulu at hulu.com/thebigpicture. Also, check out our 2 YouTube channels. There are links at thomhartmann.com. Also, at thomhartmann.com, check out all the different ways you can send us your feedback. And don't forget, democracy begins with you. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.